Welcome to episode 26 of the Free Spirit Academy podcast with speaker and self-empowerment coach Kyla Sokoll-Ward. Free Spirit Academy is about you being fully you. My name is Randy Moss, and I'm an eating psychology coach and Kundalini yoga teacher, bringing you conversations about freedom. Largely from rigid diets and painful body image, but ultimately it's about the freedom to be yourself. This is about honoring our own bodies and our purest self-expression. Welcome to the podcast. Hi everyone. This interview officially marks the start of season 2 of the Free Spirit Academy podcast. And for a while I was freaking out, like, how many episodes are supposed to be in a season and how much space happens between seasons, and am I supposed to just do a podcast a week for the rest of my life, or like how does this podcasting game work? And I was finding no help from Google, and I realized I think I'm just making this up. Maybe we're all just making this up and there aren't any rules, or maybe they are and I have not been good at finding them yet. So there are probably ways that work better than others, and it's a learning process, but I think I'm making this up. So after a 6-week summer hiatus, the podcast is back, and I'm really excited. And today I'm talking to my friend Kyla, who also made an appearance in episode 14. And when I originally recorded that interview for YouTube, gosh, at least a couple of years, maybe several years ago now, Kyla was also coaching in the world of eating psychology and intuitive eating, and we spent our conversation talking about her own journey with food and the most important things to look at when addressing binge eating and emotional eating. And then early on this year, I began noticing her message shifting, and it wasn't just the words coming out of her mouth, it was like this new power and energy behind her voice, and it seemed to have come out of nowhere. And suddenly she was doing all of this cool public speaking stuff and was just lit up in this beautiful way I'd never seen before. So I knew I'd have to have her back to talk about what that whole transformation was. And another fun fact is that Kyla used to be a client of mine, and she mentions that in the conversation, so I don't feel weird about mentioning that. And today, rather, we had this conversation weeks ago, but the conversation you're going to hear today, it was such an incredible example of the fact that we just all have something to teach each other. And so I was basically like, coach me on how to not be so socially awkward. And she said a couple of things that were actual real aha moments for me. And I'm glad that I was able to like go back through and listen to this and reabsorb and remind myself of how potent those little moments were, those few things that she said to me. So with that, I hope you enjoy this conversation with Kyla. There were a lot of light bulb moments for me as I spent years trying to understand why I struggled with binge eating. And one of them was when a teacher of mine said that binge eating is often this symbolic way that we shove down what's going unsaid. Like we're aching to express ourselves on some level, and either we don't know how or we don't feel that it's safe. And this probably isn't even something we know on a conscious level. There's just this discomfort being in our skin and in our bodies. And rather than expressing who we are, it feels safer to push it back with food. And you've had quite a journey with binge eating. We talked about that in a previous episode. And since then, my gosh, I feel like you've really found your voice in this incredible way. Like, I remember watching your Instagram stories at some point last year and thinking like, holy shit, where did this woman come from? So what happened? Like, what was, because you were amazing as an intuitive eating coach and sharing your journey and working with people. And then all of a sudden it was like, I don't even know you anymore. And it's in the most incredible way. Like, was it a natural transition to being this more, like, I know you do women's empowerment now, and like, how do you describe what you do? And was this natural? Did it surprise you? Where did this come from? Like, how did you find your voice where you're currently at?
Yeah, it was more, I feel like it started with an aha moment, similar to the one that you had described with your journey with binge eating, and kind of just followed in this slow journey progression from there in terms of, so I actually remember like that specific aha moment. I was lying in bed one night, like sort of just before I'm about to fall asleep, which is where I have like 80% of my breakthroughs. It's like in that weird unconscious state. And I had this idea of like, what if I started coaching people on limiting beliefs and up leveling and more on like vision work and less on food. And I got this feeling in my body. Like I was so excited. It was this rush. Like I was on a roller coaster. And when I get really excited about things, like to my core excited, I start crying. And I was like immediately started crying. And then like 1 second later, like truly 1 second later, my fears just flooded my mind of like, you don't know how to do that. You're not good enough. What if no one likes it? What if it doesn't make sense to anyone but you? And all this stuff. And I knew in that moment, I was like, this is, I always say the perfect cocktail for transformation is 50% fear and 49% fear and 51% inspiration. And like all you need is that extra 1%. And it just feels terrifying to do something really big. And, and I think a lot of this started like this whole desire to maybe coach people on transformation versus just transformation with food was when I went through a really, really massive breakup like a year and a half ago, and like really had no choice but to overturn how I was living my life and how I viewed my world because I was suffering so much. And and just with all of the work that I did in my own life and how I saw it change the way that I ate and dressed and took care of myself and talked to people, like it just changed everything. And I think seeing that ownership in my life really sparked something within me to share it with other people as well.
Do you feel like, because I'm thinking about how there are so many things that I wouldn't have even been able to dream of, like be inspired to do first gotten through the food and body thing and come to an understanding of what that was there to show me about myself. Do you feel like that is also true for you? And
oh my gosh.
Either way, would you walk us through kind of a mini version for those who haven't listened to that other episode of what your journey with food was?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yes, that's definitely true for me in a billion and one ways. And so I, like you, had a pretty long journey with food, and at first really struggled with restrictive eating and trying to be the healthiest version of healthy eater there ever was. And that definition became more and more narrow every day for years. And suddenly nothing was safe to eat and all these things. And, and then of course, this was backfiring me through binge eating. And I just, like most people, had this thought that, I just have a willpower problem and I just need more willpower and then I'll stop binge eating and I'll finally be the healthiest person. And it really, really felt like food and eating and binge eating and not binge eating, these were my things I needed to conquer in order to become perfect. And it was like, I'm almost there. All I have to do is fix my food problem. And finally, when I fix the food problem, then I'll be able to show up this way or wear this thing or be this happy. And it, consciously or unconsciously, like that was really, really the belief there. And there were so many things. Like you said, sort of at the beginning of this conversation of like, there were so many ways that I was silencing myself, just in terms of being comfortable with who I was and what I was experiencing. Like it just didn't feel safe to feel my emotions. And again, that was, I think a lot of people might hear that and be like, I don't know, that doesn't feel true for me. And I mean, again, that wasn't a conscious thing I had going on. I didn't think consciously to myself every day, it doesn't feel safe to feel sad. Like,
right.
It just, I never allowed the feeling to come up. And so I never knew what it felt like to be truly, truly sad. It's like, I think one of the most, one of the most challenging and upsetting and depressing things about being someone who binge eats over their emotions is like, you only really stay in this middle field all the time. And you never really feel the extreme highs and the extreme lows. And because we're so afraid of those. And like, I would binge eat over my happiness all the time. And I just was sort of in this medium non-state feeling all the time. And so that was one way that I really, really silenced my true joy and silenced my true sadness and just I felt uncomfortable with how happy I could be. And I felt really unsafe with being as sad as I was. And so I just really numbed myself for years.
That's really interesting that you describe it that way, because I have described it differently, like almost the exact opposite, even though I think we're probably essentially saying the same thing. Because for me, I have often said that I felt numb already, and binge eating it was my highs and lows. Like I got this super, super high, first of all, from planning the perfect diet. Because for me, I think I've realized at this point that there was so much going on underneath, so much potential feeling, a whole lot of pain that I was really, really afraid, and a lot of power too that I was afraid of feeling, a lot of like just who I naturally was, I was afraid of feeling. So there was this numbness on top of it, and I just felt like I don't feel anything. And so binge eating, there was like this high from planning the perfect diet, and then this high of like holding on really, really tight to it. And then this terrible, terrible low when I couldn't hold on to it and went into binge eating. But then there was this brief high from letting go of all of the rules. And then this terrible, terrible low when it was all over. And then the high again of like starting the diet. So it's just really interesting how we can use the compulsive behavior, the tool, right, that we developed at one point when we didn't know how to do anything else, to manage our emotions in the only way that we know how, or the way that makes life feel bearable.
Yes, that is so interesting that we have like opposite but the same experiences with
the tool
the emotional side of it.
You know, to make life work, but what feels like working for each of us is a little bit different.
Yeah, so interesting.
So then you worked with your disordered eating. You figured that out to whatever degree for yourself, so that you felt like, I really want to help other people with this. First of all, what was that like? Was that a sort of surprise? Like, oh man, now I know what this is like to feel free in my body and not feel like, someday when my body is perfect, I can do all of these things. I need to help other people. Was that really natural at first? And then did you think, well, I'm just going to do this from here on out, forever and ever, amen?
Forever and ever, amen. How was that progression? Yeah, I had hired a coach, and was working with her for 6 months, healed my relationship to food, or at least began beginning the lifelong journey of like getting to know myself.
Yeah.
Because that's really what that was. And healing my relationship to food happens naturally, as it will for anyone. And I think, after those 6 months, and I started, I was on my own, quote unquote, for several months, and noticed like, okay, I'm able to eat ice cream and cookies and granola and all these things I was terrified of, and just like eat them and enjoy them. And they were part of my normal life. And they're not these terrifying things I'm avoiding or stuffing into my face unstoppably. Once I saw sort of how that relationship with food had really changed, I got really fired up about like eating psychology and how brainwashed so many women are with all of this, and how like just realizing like, holy shit, this isn't my fault. Like that was a really, really big breakthrough for me in healing my relationship with food, was like, this doesn't have anything to do with me being broken. Like the messages we're receiving as women are broken. The messages we're receiving about food and our bodies and exercise and what is fitness and is it important to be fit? All of this bullshit, like that is what's broken. And that how we react around food has to do with like our brain psychology and not whether or not we're broken people. And so that type of stuff really, really fired me up. And I had just received my, around that time, I had just received my certification to become an integrative nutrition health coach. And I at first thought, I went into that training, it was a year-long program. I went into that training thinking like, okay, I'm going to be a nutrition coach, because I am and was so passionate about nutrition. And then decided I wanted to use it for food and body image coaching. And, I think I was super, super dedicated to it from the start, for sure. Really had no idea what I was in for or what I was doing as a coach at first, as nobody does, but, didn't know a thing about building a business. And I think that side of it is something that has transformed massively in terms of like the business side did not excite me. And so that's why I didn't deal with it. And then just within the last year or so of like being really dedicated of like, am I going to do this or not? What is my cosmic why behind wanting to build a business for food and body image or for personal transformation? And am I going to do the things that it's going to take in order to do it or not? And just having to be really real with myself and honest about that. And it's taken, I mean, anyone who is a coach or an entrepreneur will tell you, like, this puts all of your shit right in front of your face. You can't avoid it. If something is off kilter in your life, like, it'll show up in your business. And it's just a constant process of needing to face yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you're talking about this, because you were mentioning now how, or at least in the sort of initial phases as you were transitioning your business or blossoming your business, really, if that doesn't sound too cheesy, you talked about addressing limiting beliefs. And here you are back in the food and body stuff, sort of realizing that a lot of this stuff that we have been fed as, like, to be a woman, you have to be this and do this and look this way and all of these things, and really questioning that. Was that sort of the first time that you had come up against this realization that, like, oh, I've had this set of beliefs handed to me and they might not actually be true?
Yeah, it was. And I was feeling my relationship to food for sure. Yeah, in so many ways, both about, like, my body and how I view my body, and realizing, like, oh my goodness, women in other countries, for example, like, thin women are not beautiful. And it's the women who are fat and who are curvy and who have, like, lots and lots of meat on their bones. Those are the women who are just, like, worshipped for their fecundity, who are just, like, totally bowed down to for how much, in their view. I'm not saying one view is necessarily better than the other, but different bodies are viewed in different ways in different places, and one is not right or wrong. And so that was mind-blowing to me. It was mind-blowing to me to learn that I didn't need to believe my thoughts. That was a crazy one to me. That, like, really rocked my world. It's like, oh my God, just because I'm thinking something doesn't mean it's true. It doesn't mean, like, I can choose to believe something else. And it might not sound super groundbreaking, but it's like, when you really internalize these things, it's like, I mean, it's a whole new definition of freedom and of how you're going to live your life, and of how you're going to choose to go about your world. And you really just bring yourself a million more choices in that way.
And I think
there's definitely...
It may not seem groundbreaking in this conversation at this point between us,
Mm-hmm.
because, we went through that journey at a certain point. But I mean, and I'm sure you see this with your clients too, to watch somebody go through that for the first time, like, oh my gosh, this loop of thoughts that is continuously playing in my mind isn't actually, like, authentic to me, and isn't actually true, because it's clearly hurting. And it is a huge revelation.
Yeah.
And
and
that's so interesting. And I'm sure that you see this too, is once people start questioning all of this stuff about food and body, they start questioning everything.
Yes. Yeah. And that's why
what happened for you. Like, this
doesn't stop. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'm sure you're going where I ask anyways.
Probably going in the same place. Like this, it's so all encompassing. And that, like, one thing that I know I say, and I know you say, and many other food and body image coaches wouldn't have said, is, like, this isn't about food. It's not, like, again, this isn't a willpower problem. It's not you needing to eat different things. It's just, like, this is about your relationship to yourself, and what isn't serving you there. And that when you really work with this relationship to yourself, and you get curious about exploring who you are and why you do and believe the things that you do, then healing your relationship to food is something that you'll want to do naturally, and you will want to ease yourself into it and be gentle with yourself and just have it work itself out, instead of this forceful thing of needing to fix something that you think is broken.
So where did it go for you after that? Like, once you sort of settled into that and you started realizing, like, okay, not all of my thoughts are true. Like, so much must have happened between that and you realizing, like, I want to coach women on transformation and empowerment. Like, what was your personal transformation after that initial sort of awakening?
I had been coaching for maybe 2 years or so. And around the time when I had that aha moment of, I think I want to do self-transformation coaching, I was at a point in coaching with food and body image where I didn't feel excited about it anymore. And I think I didn't know that I wasn't excited. I just thought, again, oh man, wait, I'm having a moment right now of realization. It was like my relationship, y'all are seeing the process right now. It was like my relationship with food, in that I was like trying to fix it from the outside. So I was like, maybe it'll feel exciting when I get more clients. Maybe it'll feel exciting when 10 people sign up for this program. Maybe it'll feel exciting when I'm making more money. Like, and I just wasn't that jazzed about talking about it anymore. And it felt kind of like, cool, all right, like I did the food and body thing. I feel like it felt complete. And I felt like I had helped the women that I needed to help. I had really gone through a lot of my own beautiful healing while coaching. And it felt good, and it felt right. And it felt like there was maybe something bigger on the other side, but I was afraid. And yeah, so there was definitely like that moment of having to be honest with myself of like, the reason this isn't fun anymore is because I'm not enjoying myself, and I'm not coaching on something that feels empowering to me. And that not only is it fair to myself because I'm not doing something that I think is fun, but it's obviously not fair to the people that I'm serving for me to not be jazzed about it. And like just how much that translates to the rest of our lives of like us doing things and saying things that we don't really stand by and that don't excite us in our soul. Like it serves nobody. It serves absolutely nobody. And yeah, just such an important thing to keep in mind when we're choosing what we do. And not just for work. I just mean doing things in general.
It's true. And all the time, I'm just thinking about how lucky I feel to be in a time and place where we can be like, I'm not excited about that, so I don't think I'm going to do it. What am I excited about? Like, that's so that we live in this time and place. It blows my mind all the time. I'm going to go off on a rant that's going to sound maybe ridiculous, but like the internet blows my mind. Like what we can do.
Yeah.
And like I figured a thing out and got training obviously after that and was really excited about it. So I created a business on the internet just because I was excited about it. Like, it's just, I don't know. I feel so insanely, I mean, we're stupid privileged. It's unbelievable. And at the same time, like, of course, I feel the more privilege you have, the more responsibility you have, which also, okay, my brain's going all over the place, leads me to thinking about, we're talking about these belief systems that were sort of handed off to you, and it wasn't your fault. And at the same time, you took responsibility for them. So was there was there like an interim period? Because I know for me, there was a period of time where I was just really angry. I was like, oh my God, like the media and the body image industry, the diet industry, and it's everybody's fault. And this is so terrible. And I was just like really angry and, just about everything.
Society.
Yeah, you can stay there and kind of go into the stereotypical angry feminist hole, which doesn't actually serve anybody. But I think it's a very, very useful transition because we need to feel what we're feeling. Was there that sort of transition for you where you were like, oh, this is so ridiculous. I can't believe that this is the world we live in. Or did you just jump to like, oh my gosh, this isn't mine. Got to take responsibility.
Ooh, that's a good question. I know there was definitely a period of time, and this is around when I was working with you. So fun fact for anyone who doesn't know, Randy coached me as well. While I was on this food journey at a couple different points, Randy has coached me. And, oh man, there was definitely a period of time where like, after I realized like, okay, women are taught not to eat these things. And definitely had this like angry phase a little bit. And in that time I was eating a lot of things that like didn't make my body feel good, but I was like, fuck it. This is like, I don't care. I can eat whatever I want. And like, I totally could. And I did. And, but then I was like, I also feel like shit and I don't want to feel like shit. And so learning this was a really beautiful thing that you had taught me, was like finding freedom in boundaries, finding freedom in structure. And discipline, I think is the word that you tend to use more, like finding freedom in discipline. And that is something that I think a lot of people really crave, especially when they're in this like binge and restrict cycle madness. Like they're like, I want to be disciplined, blah, blah. Like I want to feel free and disciplined. It's like, you know what? You don't really get to get there until you have gone off the freedom, like deep end. And like, I needed to know what I needed in my soul to feel like what it felt when I was eating whatever I wanted and not feeling good physically. Like that was important for me to experience. And
I don't know. I think it's possible to do it any other way, because I feel like it's the natural maturation process. Like we have to go through this teenage season of like no rules, no structure. I'm going to do whatever I want and it's going to be so great, and really believe that and go all in, and then realize like out of your own organic experience, like, oh, this doesn't actually feel good. I don't actually feel free. Okay. But like you got to totally do your own thing and figure it out yourself. And then you get to actually choose the structure that serves you.
Yes. And like it really, really being about choice and not about being disciplined for the sake of not liking yourself. Like, no, it's really about like everything serving whatever your highest purpose is in that moment. And like, again, it all goes back to just being really honest with yourself and being able to take a bird's eye view of your life at any point, and being really present. It's like when we're binge eating, we're not being present, we're refusing to be present. And when you're actually being present with yourself, you can say like, does binge eating serve me? That's like, maybe it does. Wake up to your binge eating and be there with it. And I know you're always preaching about that. And like, sometimes eating 10 Oreos is what's going to serve you. And maybe it's only for a certain period of time in your life. And at other points, it is not that. And I think this goes like back to my business transition as well, of just like needing to take that bird's eye viewpoint at all times and look at like what's working and what's not. And I can say I'm an entrepreneur and I can go travel places and spend a lot of money and whatever and live that dreamy lifestyle, but like that's not what most of it is at all. And like it's a lot of like working really hard and doing shit that you don't always want to do in order to build the thing that you want to build. And and just knowing that like it's going to take work, it's going to take some push, it's going to be hard.
No, I was just saying like you might not want to do it sometimes in the moment, but it's in service to what you actually want to do. So it's not like you're just sort of marking yourself out for something else. Like it is what you want to do, just maybe not in that moment. And that thinking back to what you were saying about how after we go through that free-for-all phase with food and we're learning to bring in structure and whatever really gentle discipline actually works for us, it only works because we're not doing it because we don't like ourselves, or we're not doing it to be good. And you wrote this really amazing post on Instagram, and maybe it was in other places, but I read it on Instagram, and you talked about the difference between liking yourself and actual self-love, and how you actually like yourself on any given day in order to have that like deep, steady, consistent love for your being. So what is your take on that?
Yes, this is big. I preach this one to my clients a lot of like, you have to love who you are. You have to love your thoughts. You have to love your past. You don't have to like any of it. It doesn't mean that your thoughts always have to feel good. It doesn't mean that the things you do always have to feel good, or the things you've done have to feel good. That would mean liking it. Like people say like, I don't love that I'm binge eating. And I can tell them, no, you don't have to like binge eating. Most people don't like binge eating because it feels like shit. So no, most people don't like binge eating, but that doesn't really matter. You do have to love it though, because when we love something, all that means is acceptance. It's like loving a child. Like your kid is going to be annoying. It's going to throw tantrums. It's going to piss you off some days, but you need to love them because parents love their kids and they accept that they're throwing tantrums. It doesn't mean that they think it feels good when they're throwing a tantrum, but they're going to love them through it anyway, because that's what children deserve. And it's the same with ourselves. When we're dealing with things that are hard, we don't have to think that they're awesome or we want them to continue forever. It just means like, it is okay for me to be a human right now. It is okay for me to struggle. It is okay for me to have this thing that doesn't feel amazing in my life. Like so often we're in this princessy phase of like, this is happening and I don't like it. And it's like, you know what? No one really cares whether or not you like it, but you do need to love it and accept that it's happening, because otherwise you're just going to do things that avoid you from dealing with it, like binge eating or whatever other coping mechanism you're using. And to just realize like what you're dealing with is very human. Your way of wanting to solve it is also very human. It's all good. It's all okay. You need to be there with yourself to really be inside of it.
Right, which I think totally lines up with everything you talk about with being in alignment with life, like loving anything, but let's just say binge eating is just loving it because it's there for you. Like it's bringing a message,
Yes.
it's not random. And so to love it is not like, oh, lovey, squishy, all this stuff. Saying like, all right, this is what life is offering. This is what life is offering as a medium for the message to me. And loving it in alignment with what's happening. Like, this is just what's happening, whether I like it or not. So let me figure out why it's happening.
Yes. Yeah. Whether we like it or not, it's already happening. And that's kind of the interesting thing, is that a lot of people think, well, if I love this, then it'll keep happening.
Totally.
It's like, it's happening anyway. Who cares? Like you might as well, even if that were true, which it's not, but even if it were, it's like, then it'll keep happening and you won't feel so bad about it. Like you'll accept that like this is just a thing that exists for you right now. But of course, like love is the only pathway to transformation. That's the only way we can transform something, is when we accept that it's there in the first place, because otherwise we're never going to even acknowledge it. And it can't go away if we don't know it's there.
So outside of food and body, are there particular topics or belief systems or things that you like to work with, or that you like to sort of question people on? Are there certain things that come up again and again in your world?
Ooh, yeah, I think a lot of those things, most of like how people are showing up socially, I think is a big one. And just how conditioned we all are to behave in certain ways in social settings. And, like, whatever, I'm just as conditioned as the next person, but I find it really significant to be really an investigator about this within ourselves and among our peers, because how we're showing up. And I don't, when I say social settings, I don't just mean like at parties, like literally whenever there are other people around. That's what I mean by socially. And like how we're showing up and how we're choosing to be vulnerable and authentic and real and honest with one another. That's what's going to change the world, when there are more people being honest and being vulnerable with one another, and just willing to come forward and say like, hey, I'm dealing with this thing today, or just be really honest when people ask you how you're doing, and like to not always be like, yeah, I'm good, I'm fine. Like that's not true for anybody usually. And those things of like really questioning, like, why am I behaving this way? Why do I say this thing whenever someone asks me? Why do I feel uncomfortable in this situation when I'm with other people? And just really being able to examine those and then show up more honestly. Like that, for me, this specific piece of showing up in social settings, that I think is my biggest like cosmic why of like the world will change when we all evolve differently in social settings. So that's a really, really big one for me in my world.
Oh man, I feel like we could spend the rest of the time talking about just that, because I mean, I'm like, hey, you want to coach me? Because I could use some of that. And I guess for me, the thing that I have found, I mean, I am introvert extraordinaire. I could go, just live in a cave and happily entertain myself for the rest of the days. And that's a little extreme, but I'm really, really introverted. And so for a while, it was me just really embracing that and just sort of being okay with like, hey, you're an introvert and you don't have to go to all the things. And one of the most pivotal things for me, and I still tell myself this, like this is still a tool I use, is just, Randy, all you have to be is yourself. And it'll calm me. Like I could even go to, and I will use party or event as an example, go and feel super, super awkward and then have to like take myself to the bathroom and be like, okay, Randy, all you have to do is be yourself. And then I go out and I'm like a totally different person. I don't know why that takes the pressure off of me personally, but okay. So some things that are jumping out for me, like when you're engaging with people and they're asking you how you are, to be able to answer them honestly, what popped up for me is like, well, sometimes I don't want to get into a conversation. Sometimes I just want to be like, see ya. Cause to say like, I'm all right, opens a door that maybe I don't have opened. Like, what do you say in that case? Do you feel like that is me shutting myself down, or is that legit? Or I mean, what would you say to a client?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm also incredibly introverted. And like, frankly, because we're all so conditioned and most people are like, when they are engaging socially, they're doing it with small talk, and all introverts are exhausted by small talk.
Oh my God, I'm so tired. Yes.
yeah, it's exhausting. And also knowing that, like, if you do open that can of worms with someone, a lot of people, I'm not going to say most, but like a lot of people probably aren't going to receive it because they're not willing to receive it within themselves. And like, or like it'll make them uncomfortable. And again, it's like, whatever, nothing wrong with that person. Their condition, just like the rest of us, we're not comfortable with vulnerability most of the time. So yeah, like one thing I always say is like, not everyone deserves your vulnerability. Not everyone deserves your most raw honesty. And to practice, like, this comes with really knowing yourself, is like having the discernment to know who deserves that from you. And yeah, sometimes like when someone asks me how I'm doing, I'll be like, I'm doing okay today, thank you. And I don't need to go down that road with everybody. And of like really protecting your own energy. So much of it is about protection. Like, not everyone deserves your energy, and like put up boundaries, and it is okay. And knowing when to push yourself and when it is time to break out of the introvert bubble. And those are usually harder moments to do that, when you're like, I want to crawl into a cave, but I know I should probably go talk to people. And
it's not,
again, with knowing yourself like
of should anymore. It's like this inner knowing of like, okay, I'm ready. Step out, stretch a little bit more in that direction. I know that that's my next step, is where
just walk into the edge.
That reminds me of an article that I end up sending it to a lot of my clients. I love it so much. Danielle Laporte wrote this article called Open Gentle Heart, Big Fucking Fence. And I bring that phrase to my mind a lot too, because I think what I've done for a long time is, because I am so tired around people, I just kind of close off and I don't connect because of that. And I've realized that that's kind of exhausting too. I completely shut down. I don't feel anything. I don't connect with anybody. And I can get this very like, well, I'm an introvert. I'm so over this small talk thing. Like, I don't even want to be here. But at this point, if I'm choosing to show up somewhere, it's a gentle reminder to myself, like, it's actually safe. Like, it's safe to keep your heart open, and it's safe to feel, and it's safe to look people in the eye. And it's also safe to keep up a fence. You don't have to speak up if you don't want to speak up. You don't have to engage if you don't want to engage, but you still need to feel. Like, I need you to feel everything in this moment. And then, like, when it's time to go, you're going to know that. You're going to feel that. So that's been really, really useful for me.
Oh, yes. I love that so much. It's so beautiful. Yeah. And I think it's, I don't know about you, but I can feel myself when I'm in those moments of like, oh, well, I'm just introverted and everyone here is into small talk and I'm not. Like, we can get really self-righteous about it. And like you said, it's exhausting.
Like I was last night having a conversation with family who, like, I don't get to see very much, and I'm like trying to be open, and it's my wife's family, and I want to get to know them, and there's still this kind of awkward, because we don't really see each other that often thing, but it's a lot of small talk, and I'm sitting there in the back of my mind this whole time thinking, like, is anybody really enjoying this? And so I'm like, does anybody enjoy small talk? Is that just the way we have to ease into things? Like, do you have any ways of being open and vulnerable without needing to be like super mushy gushy with every person you meet? Like, you genuinely want to connect without the tiresome, tedious small talk entryway.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Okay.
I think there's, I think there are like really beautiful ways of asking the same questions we're all asking each other, but in ways that are going to get people to give more than that, like allow people to think and allow people to explore themselves. So like one question I'll always ask, instead of, and this is a coach of mine used to always ask me this every time we would get on a call together, instead of saying, how are you? He would say, what are you celebrating today? Oh. And it like gets people, which is like a lovely way of like asking me to think about something good that happened recently. And it, like, again, it just gets me to think, gets me to explore myself, and gets me like, I get to be in my joy and he gets to witness my joy. And that's like a win for everybody. And it was actually, it's kind of funny that I'm saying this.
I love that in a coaching situation. And I'm sorry to interrupt. Please hold on to my thought. I'm such a terrible sometimes. I love that in a coaching situation. And I've brought that to my clients too. And I think it's so beautiful in that container. But then I get really cynical and I'm like, oh, that's so cheesy, because I know people like that. And they'll be like, you know, hey, what you celebrating today? And I'm like, oh, did your life coach tell you to do that? And I... in the back of my mind, I'm so terrible. And I'm like, and I'll usually answer and whatever. But like, how do we keep the cheese factor out of it?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a great question. It's funny because I'm like laughing as we're talking about this specific phrase because I asked this to someone just a few days ago, and he was like, he was like clearly really caught off guard with that question. He was like, I don't know, nothing, I guess. Like work is really stressful. And I was like, nothing, like nothing to celebrate. He was like, I don't know. And he's just like clearly very uncomfortable. And that was one of those moments where I was like, okay, energetic boundaries. I'm going to stop talking.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, like, good to see you. Like, and it's one of those things. Oh, okay. I think this is the big one. It's like when we're connecting with other people and when we're like out to connect with people in the world, let it be a little awkward. And sometimes you're going to ask a question that other people are going to be very thrown off by. And like, it might be kind of awkward, and like connection is awkward. And I think that's a really important and valid truth to live with, that like, especially with everyone's conditioning, it could get a little awkward, and that's just like not the worst thing that could happen. And yeah, just like, let it be silly. Let it be a little silly of like, okay, we're going to like laugh at how uncomfortable it feels for you to talk about what you're celebrating or not celebrating in your life. Like, that's okay. And, yeah. And to ask people about things that make them feel excited and things that to like give people reflections that are real and, allow them to open up to you and to listen in a more empathic way. And all of these things like might feel awkward for you or for the other person for some period of time. And like, that's okay.
Oh my gosh. As you were saying that, I felt this layer of tension come out of my body. I think that it's funny how we go through layer after layer after layer of these things. Like the earliest thing, obviously, maybe not so obviously, I don't know, being the belief that I once had where like, once I have the perfect body, everything's going to be okay. Someday this, like someday I'll get my happily ever after. And I think that there's still a part of me that thinks like someday I'm going to be super eloquent and always like charming and funny and so just like zen and comfortable in my skin. And everybody's like, wow, she's so like, she must be a meditator or, yeah. And it's like, maybe it's just like, maybe it's okay to be awkward and just to like, let that be and not make such a big deal out of it. And maybe I make too big a deal out of awkward.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we're so afraid of discomfort. And, it's just like one of those constant practice things of like, it's just a little discomfort. It's just a little awkwardness. Like, it's just a thing that you're experiencing, like sadness or anger or happiness, whatever else. Like, just feeling a little awkward today. That's okay.
Right. And I think another opportunity to find a piece of yourself that you're not loving fully and completely. So maybe in this case for me to be like, all right, so I'm just going to have to love the awkward part of me. Maybe that's just got to be all right. Because I definitely have noticed that for every other area that I've discovered in myself, like the part of myself that I fear is just really stupid, or the part of myself that I feel is just really arrogant and that's going to be a problem, or like all of these things that I've had the hardest time looking at, once I've totally faced them and been like, okay, you know what? Maybe so. Maybe that's true. Once I let them be, they almost show me another side of themselves. They become this more whole piece of me. And they serve me in a way that they didn't before when I was judging them as just this one simple thing that was bad about me. So I'm really interested to see what is under this.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful way of putting it. It's so true. It's just examining what's there, and I think also like really important, like as you're saying, you have to like accept this awkward part of yourself, to accept that you're being awkward or whatever it is, to also recognize that like we're all obsessed with our own experiences, and that we always think that whatever we're displaying to other people is like happening way more intensely than it is. Right. And that like, oh, I'm so awkward. And it's like, everyone's only thinking about themselves. And it's like, that's just usually the truth. And, and like people think that they're super awkward. Everyone thinks they're the most awkward person on the earth. And like, to also sit with that is just like, it's probably not as bad as I think it is.
Right. And also I would add to that, that's, I think, largely true. And I'm also thinking of when I work with people who are worried that, they're going to go to the social event and this person's going to think they're fat, or that person's going to think they're ugly, or that, whatever. Yes. First of all, that's probably not true. And second of all, can we be so intent on our practice of loving ourselves thoroughly through it, that even if they were thinking that, you'd still be all right.
Yeah. Yes. That like you are still, no matter what other people are thinking, you're still bigger than anyone's opinion. So much bigger.
You might not like it, might not be your preference. It'd be if everybody liked you, but you'd be okay. And because sometimes there's a point where it feels like, you know, at certain points where we're just going to die if we found out somebody thought that about us. And that's not freedom at all. Like that's absolutely the opposite.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with that said, I always tie up conversations with this question, this being the Free Spirit Academy podcast. The way I define a free spirit, which is not in the dictionary, I'm just totally defining it for myself, is you when you get to be completely yourself. That's it, just pure. Mm-hmm. When you hear the phrase free spirit, how do you define it for yourself, or what comes up for you?
Oh my gosh. The first image I have in my mind is just like dancing like a fairy in a field of flowers. That's a free spirit. Yes. I think it's a deep connection with yourself with a lot of lightheartedness. So knowing that we all got a whole lot of demons inside of us and a whole lot of conditioning and a whole lot of generations of inherited trauma, and also everything's okay. And we're just like these little kids inside of these adult bodies, and we have jobs and rent to pay, and that everything's just a game, and we're just here to play with each other and to see who can love the hardest, and to take everything that we have inside of us and to just let it all be a little bit more fun, and to dance in a field of flowers if that's what your heart freaking desires.
Oh, I love that so much. I love it so much. You can take the whole personal growth, personal development things so very seriously, and look at all of the conditioning, all of the limiting beliefs, all of this stuff, and be like, this is what's wrong with me. This is what I need to fix to be enlightened, to be myself, to be happy, to be free, blah, 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 whatever. But there's so much freedom by just looking at it as like, oh, hey, this is all here for me. Like, this is here for me to uncover myself and develop into more of that on my path. And the lighthearted thing is just, I mean, it's key. It's everything. It's the key to enjoying the journey. And I hate it when cliches come out of my mouth, but yes, I adore that. Thank you so much. I'm going to have this fairy image dancing through my head the rest of the day. That's
yes.
Is there any direction that you would like to point people? Oh, and do you have a talk coming up?
I will have a talk. Yes is the answer. I recently recorded a talk that I did in Los Angeles a few weeks ago, and that should be on the internet within the next month or so. Just waiting to hear back from videographers. And then I'll be speaking at a few different events, but not till September for right now. But but when that link goes live, I'll send it out to people.
By the time that this is out, that should be out. So if you are listening to this, the link will be in the show notes. All of Kyla's website, coaching information, Instagram, which absolutely follow her on Instagram. There's so much really useful stuff there. And thank you so much. This was such a treat.
Thank you, Randy. It's always such a joy to have these awesome, easy, flowy conversations with you. Like, it always ends in magic.